Hi everyone. I'm here doing a remake of my original video on this Weldpro 200 welder. But before I do, there's a couple of things I want to explain and a full disclosure I'd like to make because a few things have happened to me since I made the first video. To date, this is my third Weldpro welder that I've purchased, and I'm happy with all three of them. I started out with a small MIG welder that I needed to get a couple of things done in the garage, and the TIG welder that I had it was just too much to do for TIG welding. Anyway, I bought this 155. It was a dual voltage welder. It worked out great. My son and my two son-in-laws saw the welder, and they all decided they had projects at home, so they kidnapped it, and it was gone for quite a while. So I said to my wife, just let the kids keep it, and maybe I'll get another one. This is what prompted me to buy the 200 model. When I bought the 200 model, I was looking at it for reviews. There were no reviews because the company was relatively new. But what inspired me to make this video was a gentleman who returned the welder and put a review out there with 1 star saying that he never actually even used the welder. He just gave it 1 star because he thought the manual was a little bit vague. I said, geez, that's just not a fair assessment. So anyway, I bought the welder. I wanted to try it out, and I love this thing. I'll show you all about it. I'm going to try to include at least everything that I put in the first video, and hopefully I'll be able to touch on a few things that I forgot to touch on the first time. But after I bought the first one, after I bought the second one, I got a little bit more involved with hobby welding in the garage. I'm just a retired guy who many years ago in another life owned an automobile repair shop, did a lot of drag racing, a lot of frame fabricating, a lot of roll cages, a lot of rear end narrowing. And so I come from a background of welding, and I've always enjoyed welding. But now I'm just retired, and I decided I also wanted a plasma cutter. Well, I called Weldpro to get a plasma cutter, and I purchased a plasma cutter. That would have been the third purchase. And they approached me at that point and were grateful that I made a video about their welder and wanted to know whether or not I would do a video of the Weldpro plasma cutter. And they also said that in the near future, there's going to be a new addition to the Weldpro line, and it's going to be a 200 amp AC/DC TIG welder. Well, TIG welding's my love, and I was just so excited that they wanted me to do this. So the disclosure is I am doing this for them, and I'm remaking this video because for Christmas I got a high definition camcorder, and I might as well do it in high definition. My ancient camcorder that I used the first time around just didn't quite cut it quality-wise. But I've never made any videos for YouTube. I've never done anything like this. So this is going to be, it's all new to me. So we're learning the video thing as we go along. Right now, what I'm going to do is kind of spin the camera around, show you what I have for those other two welders, and then we'll come back to this one, and we'll do the video. So hang in there. I'm going to spin this camera around. So what you're looking at now is the plasma cutter on top and that little model 155 on the bottom. Both work just fine for me. This is just a very small little garage I do my hobby stuff in. You guys probably want to take a little peek at what garbage I'm hiding around in here. But here's a little quick view of what keeps me off the streets. Hold on, I'll turn this around so you can see it facing frontwise as well. So there's the plasma cutter on top, and there's that nice little 155. Actually all three of these are dual voltage, which is nice. So there's where I am so far, and let's get this thing back spun around, and I'll go over the 200 MIG, which I think you guys are going to like some of the features on this thing, and the price is very reasonable too. So let's do it. Okay, I think I've got the entire welder and frame here so I can talk about it a little bit. I'm going to try to go through this step by step and try to explain it as best I can, keeping in mind I'm not an expert. I don't profess to be, so if I screw things up, anyway, I don't want to get into that. So this welder is both dual voltage, 120, 240. It's a synergic designed MIG welder, and I'll get into that for a moment. It allows you to adjust wire speed and voltage together. The welder actually makes the calculations and determines the correct voltage for whatever wire speed you choose. So for example, if I go down here on the wire, you can see that the voltage is going down accordingly. I'll get my hands out of the way. So they adjust together, so you don't have to worry about trying to figure out what the correct voltage is for the correct wire speed. But I'm going to come into some adjustments that you could make to fine-tune these settings. But first I want to talk about the different kinds of welding that it's capable of doing. Of course, MIG welding, and it is also capable of flux core welding. It's capable of lift TIG welding. It's capable of stick welding. So in the MIG choice here, as I said, it's a synergic design, so we can move both together, amperage and, well, I keep saying amperage, wire speed is current. So let's move this down to 20 because my math is terrible, and I'll show you something. Okay, there we are. Now we're at 20 volts, 330 inches per minute. Let's say, for example, I wanted to make a slight adjustment to the voltage and increase it a little or decrease it a little. By hitting this menu button and going to voltage, we can adjust the voltage plus or minus 20% of whatever the current voltage reading is. So we are at 20 volts now. I can actually bring this down to minus 20% of 20, and it shows 16 volts because 20% of 20 is 4, and we subtract 4 volts off the 20. Now we have a reading of 16 volts at 329 inches per minute. Conversely, I can bring this thing all the way up to plus 20. And now I'm at 24 volts, and I'm at 329 inches a minute. Now that's way more variance than you're ever going to have to worry about. So while it is a synergic design, while you can make these adjustments together and the welder will compensate for everything, you have the additional option of separating the adjustment of voltage and wire speed by using the voltage menu. Now beyond that, you get to do something even more intricate that a lot of welders don't have the feature at this price range, and that's inductance. The inductance setting is a plus or minus 10%. This machine will allow you to adjust welding inductance by plus or minus 10% of whatever the default factory value for inductance is. And inductance, as I understand it, and again, I'm not an expert, but inductance is the time that it takes for your wire, as you're welding, as you're MIG welding and the wire comes out and it touches your work. As soon as it touches the work, it creates a short circuit. And the short circuit heats up this MIG wire. Now, the faster the MIG wire heats up, the faster it melts, and it can pop. It can make, all kinds of spatter in the weld. But if you add inductance to it, it curves the short circuit time. And what it does is builds energy, and as the wire heats and gets to its melting point, it stores energy in that heat and releases it into the weld. The weld gets flatter, it gets less spatter, and you can even make a more concave weld, a little flatter weld, by adjusting inductance. And inductance comes in nicely with different thicknesses of metal. So this machine allows for a plus or minus 10% of the factory inductance setting. And when you make those adjustments, you'll be able to see how the weld reacts to the change in the inductance and the heating of the wire. That's the second option. Now, you know, you don't have to use that all the time, and it's just another option, another available option to you. The more options you have, the better off you are. The more latitude you have to make changes to your weld and to get it just the way you want it. Okay, so that was first the voltage, plus or minus 20% of the current voltage value. Inductance, plus or minus 10% of whatever the factory setting for inductance is on this machine, and they're all probably pretty much standard from what I've read. They're in the, I guess, 35% range, but that's the inductance. And the third option here is wire diameter. And there's three choices for wire diameter: 40, 30 thousandths, and 23 thousandths. And these are values that are set so that the machine can better calculate the synergic values so that it can adjust both the wire speed and the voltage at the same time. Now, you can put in wires that are different thicknesses than this, but these settings here, these three settings of 23 thousandths, 40, 30, are all just approximations. So if you have a 24 wire, set it on 23. If you have a 35 thousandths wire, you know, you can set it on either 30 or 40 and see which is better for your particular job. So those values are simply there to give the machine a running start on how to adjust its voltage and wire speed together. All right. And that's all there really is as far as the menu settings for MIG welding. As far as setting up the machine, this is your torch cable, and this machine has a little dongle in front, and this dongle is basically designed to be the final complete connection for your torch. This is the plus side, this is the minus side. When you connect this little dongle to the plus side, you're using your torch with reverse polarity, electrode positive, and that's the way we MIG weld, with reverse polarity. Flux core welding is just the opposite, and a lot of people forget to make that change when they're trying to flux core weld. But for flux core, you'd take this other lead out, which is your work, your clamp, currently in negative, you bring it over to the positive side. You take this one out, bring it over to the negative side. So when you're flux core welding, you're welding with straight polarity, electrode negative. So flux core needs to have that polarity change, and if you forget to do it, you're going to get a mess of a weld. So that's what this little dongle is for. It's just for setting the polarity of your torch. Over here, there's a little button that says remote, and if you turn this button on and it lights up, you have the remote feature enabled so that you can disconnect your torch, connect a spool gun, and weld aluminum with this machine. After you're done, you turn off the remote feature, reconnect your torch, and MIG weld normally with your torch. So that's what the remote feature is. It's nice to be able to do the aluminum welding too. The next option on this machine is the lift TIG option. Under the lift TIG option, there are no sub-menus needed. It's nothing here. Simply a set command and the amperage. And you can set the amperage wherever you want to set it for the lift TIG. Now the machine comes with a TIG torch. It's a nice number 17 TIG torch. And I think if I have it nearby, I don't know if I even have it nearby because I'm never prepared for anything. But it also comes with a starter set of collets and even a piece of tungsten, I believe. Yeah, here we go. So here's a little starter kit that you can have. I guess it's got the 3 sizes in there, maybe 3/32, 16th, and 1/8 inch. But this is a lift TIG torch. So what you would need to do to use this now, when you TIG weld, you run straight polarity, electrode negative. So you would hook this up to straight polarity, electrode negative for TIG welding, and this hose would have to go directly to your regulator for argon. You have to remember that when you're TIG welding, you don't use the carbon dioxide argon combination, the C25. You have to use straight pure argon. So if you're going to do any lift TIG welding with this, and I suggest you try it because it's very nice, you're going to have to get a tank of pure argon. And you would hook this up to the regulator, you know, set it at about 20 cubic feet an hour, and then right before you're ready to weld, you turn on this knob and it'll feed the argon to the torch tip, and you set your amperage where you want it, and then you would touch the tungsten to your work and just lift it, and the arc would start, and then you can TIG weld as you normally would. When you're done with your weld, you can just snap out of the weld quickly because you don't want to make that puddle. So usually what I do, if I don't use it, I'll show you something in a minute. I usually come and do my weld, and when I'm done with my weld, I come back into it a little bit and fill up a little bit extra metal on the end, and then just snap out of it. But there's another little trick that's worked out pretty well for me, and you guys can do this. It's cheap enough to do. I got a little piece of copper tubing at Home Depot. It was a plumbing fitting, an 1.5-inch plumbing fitting, and I just cut it down the middle one way and opened it up flat, and then I got my small little vice grips, of course, and imagine I'm welding this piece here. What I do sometimes is just at the end, I lay this down. Of course, this would be on the table. I don't have to hold it in my hand. I would lay this down next to the work, and as I come to the end of my work, I build my puddle and then just simply come off onto the copper and lift it off. Works great, no problems, and I'll tell you the truth, this thing puts down some beautiful DC TIG welds. So there's that. And like I said, there's no real settings to worry about under the lift TIG other than your amperage. Okay, we're going to click down. The next one is a stick mode. Now, in this stick mode, it's the same thing. You set your amperage and you do whatever you're going to do. It comes with this stinger. As you can see, I haven't used it yet. I don't do a whole lot of stick welding. It comes with the stinger, and when you do stick welding, you're going to do stick welding with reverse polarity, electrode positive. And you got to remember that too. So under the stick welding, there is one menu option that you have, and it's arc force. And arc force is adjustable on this machine. It's a nice feature to have. It really is. And what arc force is, basically, here, let me show you if I could find that little piece of metal again. Now, here's something. Here's a little piece of metal, and here's a stick. As you're welding with your stick, you know that this is a consumable, and it gets shorter as you weld. And as you weld and it gets shorter, you get farther and farther away from your work. And the tendency for some beginners is to overcompensate for that and get in close, get in very close to the work. But when you start getting too close to the work, the voltage arc actually goes down, and it lowers the voltage, and you stick to your work, and then you got to shake the rod and break it free. Well, what this setting here does, this arc force setting, is it enables you to increase the voltage as the stick electrode gets closer to the work, and it helps prevent your stick from sticking to the work. So another nice feature there. All right, so we moved down to 2T and 4T. That 2T and 4T has got to do with your MIG setting. And basically, it just means 2 taps of the trigger or 4 taps of the trigger. I have never even, oh, let me get back over to MIG. Okay, I have never even used the 4T. I don't know that I'd ever be doing something that required it, but here's what happens. In the 2T setting, the first turns on the MIG and the second turns it off. So you would push the button down to weld, release the button to stop. In the 4T setting, and I'm not going to physically show you that because I'll waste too much wire. In the 4T setting, you hold the trigger down and let go, but it continues to weld. So that's 2 movements there. And then to stop the weld, you push the trigger down and release it again. That's the other 2 movements. That's 4T, and that stops the weld. This idea of pushing the trigger in and letting it go and it continues to weld, it's good for out of position stuff sometimes. It's good for long runs, but I've never had the need for it. But it's there. Again, another option, and options are good. So we have the 2 and 4T setting there. Now, a couple of things that I forgot to mention. The fan on this does not run constantly, and I love that. It's nice and quiet until it needs to cool, and then the fan comes on. So that's a nice feature. Another thing that's nice, when you're feeding your new wire into this gun and you have to squeeze the trigger and allow the wire to come through, this machine can auto sense when there's no voltage and automatically speed the wire feed up to full speed after about 3 or 4 seconds of not sensing any voltage. So you don't have to go crazy turning up this knob to the fastest wire speed. This automatically will do that and feed the wire at its fastest rate to come through. That's nice. All the little things that help along the way. I don't know. Well, you know what? There's one thing in the stick mode that I didn't talk about. Let me go back to that for a minute. And that is a voltage reduction device. Now, what that means is when you're stick welding and you've got your stick electrode and bear with me here, I'm never organized. You've got your stick electrode, you've got your ground. These things are hot, electrically hot, when you're in stick mode. And the voltage can become pretty high, and you can get yourself in trouble if you touch these things incorrectly. So this voltage reduction device actually lowers the open circuit voltage as a safety feature so that you're less likely to injure yourself if something goes wrong and you touch these things together or your body becomes the ground. This can be turned on and off. It's a nice feature to have on, I think. There are some particular situations where you might want to have it off because when you strike an arc with this voltage reduction device enabled, you might have a little bit more difficulty initially getting this arc to light because we, again, initially have a low voltage here as a safety precaution. But it's usually, you don't even know it, you don't even notice it. But at any rate, you can turn it on or off. So there's that. I don't know that I've left anything out this time. Oh, let me spin this sucker around. Hope I can show you this. All right. I have wire in here now, but this can take either the small size spool or the large size. It's adjustable tension. It's got a nice cast aluminum drive mechanism. It's got a bottom feed roller. It's got a tensioner, and I think you can see in here, I hope you can see in here, this is a little wing nut where you can actually take off your Torx lead and put your wire spool in there so that you can aluminum weld. And that's pretty much it for inside here. It's well designed, it works well. And as I mentioned before in the other little video that I made, I thought this was a good feature, this idea that this opens down. Because the welding carts sometimes have 1 or 2 levels, and you may end up wanting to put this machine in the middle or on the bottom, whatever. And if this were to open up, you're not going to be able to do it. The cart's going to get in the way. But this is nice. It's just straight down, access to everything. I think that's another good feature of the machine. So all in all, we're talking about a machine that could do a lot of different kind of welding, and it works well. What I'm going to do a little bit later is try to Mickey Mouse a little welding scene together. I don't know how I'm going to do it really, but I'll show you. I'll give you guys an idea what I'm going to try, and if it works, it works. Hang tight, and I'm coming back. So here's my brainstorm. I picked this up on Amazon.com, a little spring-loaded, I don't know if you can see this. Now let me get my mitts out of it. A little spring-loaded device that actually can grab your smartphone, and it's got a mount on the bottom for your tripod. Then I'm gonna somehow clip my little welding lens on here and see if I can't mount this on a tripod and give you guys some examples of welds on this. Don't know whether it's going to be able to, if I can pull that off, that'll be great. I've never tried that before, so we'll try it. And then we're going to hook up the TIG torch, and we'll see if we can't get that. And I got a little T connector here so I can put a second regulator on my my current argon for my TIG welder, so I don't have to keep disconnecting that. But all in all, great machine. I've been running with this thing right along. It's been working flawlessly. I can tell you, it's I'm very happy with it, and that's, you know, I'm not going to go on and on about it. You guys can see all the features. You can see the differences. You could look up on the internet how much it costs and see if it's for you. If it is, wonderful. I can only tell you that it's been working great for me, as have these other 2 welders. And I'm really excited in the future to be able to do a video on this new 200 AC/DC TIG welder, because I think that's going to be great. So for now, I'm going to end the video, and I'll go back and try to do a little bit of welding and put some shots of the welding in, but I hope that I was able to help explain a little bit more about this welder. I hope that the gentleman that made the review on it can understand that it was just unfortunate, in my view, that, you know, you'd give such a negative review of something that you've never even admittedly turned on and tried. But it is what it is. Nice little welder, and we're going to stop now, and I'll see you guys probably for the plasma cutter and for the AC/DC TIG. So take care.